Hello and welcome to the After Athena podcast, People Matters. My name's Ollie McCann. I'm a partner and head of employment law at After Athena. In today's episode, we're looking at the annual Christmas festivities and what many businesses have every year, the Works Christmas Party. In particular, how can employers hold Christmas parties without falling foul of their employers' legal duties? I'm joined by my colleague Emma Christian, who is a HR consultant team lead at After Athena. So, Emma, we're fast approaching Christmas party season. Most people see the Works Christmas party as somewhere to let their hair down, have fun at the end of the year, and kick the Christmas celebrations off with colleagues. On the reverse side, I think we all know that there are potential issues that can arise from Christmas parties, and it can be challenging for employers and how they manage those issues and those risks. Firstly, I mean, what kind of Christmas parties are we akin to seeing?
Well, most commonly, we see the works meal out. It can be an arranged, full on formal event as well. It could be even a casual event, which might just be even organised by individuals within a business. But the aim is that everyone comes together. It might be to meet up with colleagues that they don't get to see on that very day to day basis and just to celebrate the end of the year. So, actually, we're sometimes moving away now from the term Christmas party to just end of year celebrations. But it's, as I say, it's a positive um, position for the business to try and celebrate with their employees.
Yeah, just picking up at the point you mentioned there, you mentioned the possibility that you've got the formal Christmas parties,
Hmm.
but then potentially informal gatherings, shall we call it,
Hmm.
between colleagues, either arranged by department or just a collection of people across the business that want to get together and celebrate. And I suppose some employers will be thinking, well, where does our obligation start and finish when there's a event that is arranged on an informal basis without the employer's involvement in it? Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenging one because people form friendships. We want people to form friendships in a work environment. It helps the day go along, and some people are lucky enough to have lifelong friendships from work. And of course, that means that there's going to be often social events that go alongside those friendships. It can be really challenging for an employer because understanding what we call vicarious liability in terms of where the obligations meet or start and end in terms of these type of events. Commonly the relationship that these individuals have been formed through work, and therefore if the event has been arranged and it's a number of individuals from that same workplace setting, then there's a real risk that there could be a vicarious liability situation should something occur on one of those individual events.
Yeah. Vicarious liability takes me back to my law degree days, many, many years ago. But for the benefit of those watching and listening, sort of from an employment perspective, it's always about assessing what is in the course of employment,
Hmm.
and the way the courts have gone is whether or not a particular event is an extension of employment. I suppose that comes back around to what you're saying is where there's a group of employees getting together because of their relationship at work, it is likely to be an extension of the workplace, which then mean that employees do have some duty and responsibility to try and control what happens at those events. Yeah, so it's a worry. It's no surprise that employers are worried about sort of issues that arise out of particularly these informal events as well as the formal ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing an increase in cases and queries from clients in relation to these things where we've ended up with a grievance because someone's had a falling out. And the client's first question is, well, why does this matter? Why is this relevant to us? And therefore, we have to then investigate and question, well, how has this event come about? Who's organised it? Who was in attendance? To really establish where the risks sit for that employer in relation to that. But as we know, that there are a lot of risks in relation to anybody who's going out, drinking, socialising, which obviously we'll get onto.
Absolutely, and it's sort of certainly last Christmas, I know of three clients that reached out to me just before Christmas and immediately after Christmas period, with issues that had occurred at the Christmas do, and all of which needed careful managing. In fact, one of them involved a director as well,
Mhm.
which made it even more challenging and tricky for the client in question. So, having to think about some of the issues we've had from the past Christmas dues with clients, so what kind of risks and issues do you foresee, employees need to be aware of?
Absolutely. Alcohol and drug use is really going to be one of the main factors of risk for our clients and any employer, really. Especially if we're going to be in a position of saying, well, let's put on a free bar or let's give some drinks vouchers. You are potentially contributing to what we could see as drunken behaviour, inappropriate behaviour. And this is where businesses really will see an increase of risk when it comes to the liability elements and trying to defend any claim, such as a sexual harassment claim that might come off the back of a Christmas party. But we've seen an insignificant rise in issues that have risen from, as you said, you've had three. I've literally just dealt with a significant complaint, and that contributed, came from a Christmas party last year, and that involved actual alcohol and drugs. That is another issue. We're seeing an increase on these party drugs that are being used, and people are thinking that they can bring them into the workplace environment, or not necessarily understanding the boundaries of where they might do something on a night out and actually to then do the same on a Christmas party. It might be that they're actually looking to supply drugs as well, which of course, this is contributing to illegal activity then.
Mm,
So we're not just dealing with potential inappropriate behaviour due to alcohol, but we might have some illegal activity going on. It could be underage drinking, if we've got some younger employees that work for us and then we're having wine on the tables. Could that be a risk there where we're enabling individuals who are under the age of 18 who wouldn't ordinarily be able to have a drink, have a drink in this kind of environment? We then have the loosening of inhibitions. Of course, that comes alongside of alcohol, and that results in other types of unacceptable behaviour. And it might be aggression. They may have had a falling out with a colleague and start feeling a little bit brave around confronting them or a manager. Or it could be that actually they've taken a liking to a member of staff and again feeling a little bit brave and thinking, I'm going to chance this, and then maybe stretching for a kiss or a grab, and therefore we end up with a sexual harassment complaint as well.
yeah, that's interesting. I'll just pick up on a couple of points there. So just on the alcohol, because obviously alcohol is not illegal
hmm
unless they're underage. How can, what should employers be doing then to try and sort of control that and reinforcing obviously the need for good behaviour?
Yeah, I mean, I would always, and I've done this for a number of my clients, drafted a memo detailing the expectations of behaviour and send that out to the staff. And it isn't about being a party pooper or the fun police, as often we're seen in HR, but it's around just making sure that they understand this is an extension of the workplace. We want everybody to have a really enjoyable time, but we also want people to feel completely safe when doing so. So that is a really good way, quite simple, shouldn't take very long to do. Get it communicated out. You can do that via all your emails, in your stand-ups, if you have those with your teams, any team meetings, but really just making that clear that we will take any action against any individuals who do fall short of that expected behaviour.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because most employers will have an alcohol and drugs policy,
hmm
but I suppose these kind of events are the few occasions where the alcohol policy expectations are dropped
Yeah,
and arguably immediately contravened.
yeah.
So it is about reminding employees about sort of the expectations around behaviour, as you say, but in a friendly and encouraging way without
Hmm.
becoming coming across as the Christmas Grinch, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think also we want people just to be able to, as I say, have fun, feel relaxed, but not take it too far. And we also see the impact of Christmas parties after the event, when something has happened and the impact and the fallout that these type of things can have. So let's not put ourselves in that position in the first place. Let's just think, well, actually, I do want to have a glass of wine with my colleagues and relax after what has probably been a very busy year, but let's do so in a sensible way.
Yeah, responsible drinking, so to speak. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And just moving that on to drugs. Sort of obviously you mentioned, the use of drugs and or supply of drugs to fellow colleagues, etc., could be actually criminal activity.
hmm
Um, Again, it's about employees sort of reminding people that drug use at work and sort of supplying drugs is illegal. but it is also a breach of the drugs policy, which will continue to be enforced
Yes,
during that event
absolutely.
and will be taken very seriously.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, as I say, the drug situation is probably the thing that we're seeing an increase on, and we've always had the Christmas party issues come January. You know, World of HR, we're always kept busy with the grievances and the complaints and the investigations, but we are seeing an increase. Over the drug use elements, and for whatever reason, employees are not necessarily understanding those boundaries. And I think that does need to be made very, very clear at the offset. And I would probably actually explicitly state that when you are communicating around set behaviours, because I think the alcohol things are given. That's what we're referring to when we're
yeah,
saying, act professionally. But I think actually spelling out that the use of drugs is completely prohibited and will not be accepted, and anybody caught doing so will be managed through the disciplinary
yeah.
procedure is really important.
Great. So, I think in summary on the alcohol and drugs front is reinforce the policies, reinforce the behaviours expected. Think about ways in which we can limit the intake of alcohol at the events. Do we give a free bar or not, or do we have a cap on the number of drinks they can have?
Mhm.
Do we give instructions to the venue to only serve certain drinks and not to serve shots or not to serve bottles of wine, etc. So that it sort of reduces the amount of drinking and makes it more difficult to get into an excessive state of drunkenness. Anything else before we move on?
No, I think so. I think certainly the restriction of alcohol it is a good idea. We don't need to do so like really
Yeah,
aggressively, but I think maybe handing out drinks vouchers instead of having a free bar might be one way. Can't It's not foolproof. Obviously, people could pass over vouchers, etc. But ultimately, if we're also restricting in terms of you can't have a double measure of a spirit and things like that, that will heavily reduce the likelihood of somebody becoming increasingly, um, well, should we say, increasingly drunk quicker. Would be beneficial.
that's all well and good for a formal event
Yeah.
organised by an employer, but how can an employer sort of manage employees that set up their own informal events, across departments or whatever? Is there anything they could do?
Yeah, I think if that's the culture of the business and that's something that's common, I still think that the memo route is a
Yeah,
good opportunity. I think having maybe briefings with the team managers, so that they can have those discussions with their staff members whilst those planning of events are happening. Because quite commonly when we talk about departmental ones, usually the manager is involved in the planning. It might be that they're going out for a meal, and that's usually the case. It's a team meal on a Wednesday night, maybe down to the local Indian, and that might be it. And things can still happen on those occasions. So even though we might not be expecting as much alcohol to be taken, things can still occur. So I think it's really important that that is communicated. That regardless of whether or not it's been organised by an individual for a group of employees or it's a huge full company event, we want to make sure that those expectations are clear.
yeah, great, thank you. And just a final part on this side, this element. Um, Young people, quite a lot of employers will have people aged 16 to 18 who are in theory still minors until
Mhm.
they hit the age of 18. Some are not able to drink because it's illegal. What can employees do to try and protect the young people that might be vulnerable to persuasion and influence from older peers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we definitely need to be thinking about a risk assessment ahead of any event, in any case, identifying who those individuals are, ensuring if it's a formal event, it's quite straightforward. We can put them on a table and make sure that they are around colleagues who we can maybe even assign colleagues to say, "Oh, we want you to kind of be a chaperone element
Yeah,
type of person to this individual, obviously not wanting them to follow them around and getting their business on a night out, but just be mindful that they're there and that we check in with them
yeah,
occasionally throughout the night, that they're still
yeah,
comfortable, that they're enjoying themselves, and that they're not basically getting up to anything that we wouldn't expect them to
yeah.
either.
Like an allocated watching guy, so to speak.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that would be quite reasonable. Be a member of the HR team if you have a HR team, or a good manager within the business would
yeah,
be a suitable person. Yeah.
that's great. And you talked about loosening inhibitions, and this leading to perhaps amorous behaviour that can
Absolutely.
get people into trouble. We're obviously talking about possible sexual harassment here, and I certainly know the three cases that I dealt with last year were all sexual harassment cases, and that's on the back of the new sexual harassment prevent duty coming into force in October last year. Do you want to just talk around sort of what the expectations are in employers around sort of preventing sexual harassment in the workplace, but also at Christmas dues?
Yeah, absolutely. So, under the new prevention obligations, there are expectations that employers do take reasonable steps to ensure that we prevent sexual harassment from occurring. And that can be anything from ED&I training with sexual harassment, making sure that we do a risk assessment, that we have companions in the business that people can go to, we have reporting lines that people can feel safe to report to in the event that they witness anything. Um, but fundamentally, it's down to culture. This situation, all of this is about the culture of the business. I've dealt with two investigations recently with one particular company where they had a heavy socializing culture is probably the best way to describe it. A lot of drink was being consumed at these events. A lot of events were taking place where there was overnight accommodation, and I just don't think that particular business fully appreciated the risks associated or the responsibility they had in relation to managing such events with a
Yeah,
lot of their staff. And this did unfortunately lead to a number of different issues being reported, and the most serious one of occurring an alleged rape as well.
yeah,
And I think, these are very, very serious allegations that then a business are left to actually investigate. And obviously, we're talking about criminal activity here alongside just unprofessional or inappropriate behaviour. So it's really, really important that businesses do just take that step back and think, right, okay, well, what are those risks? What are we looking at? How can we manage that in the best possible way? What steps can we put in place to limit the risk? We can't remove complete risk, and ultimately, you'll always have the potential for a rogue employee, but we need to put everything in place to try and stop that from occurring. But as I say, that does come down to culture and an acceptance that actually this is an environment that we shouldn't behave in that way, and that we do respect our colleagues and we do understand the term consent, which is really, really important when we talk
mm,
about sexual harassment in particular. That, there may have been some friendly conversations, and often this is the case. It might be that there's been a bit of friendly conversations, might be a bit of flirting that's been going on between two people. Christmas parties then come around, and one of them has finally felt brave enough to act on that. But actually, is there true consent there?
mm,
And this is where, it can be a challenge. And it's difficult for then the business to be left to have to then unpick it should a complaint come in after the event. A bit of a minefield, in fact, really.
yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah, it's difficult because it's, I suppose the definition of sexual harassment is around unwanted conduct, and
yes.
that's in the eye of the recipient of the
Yeah,
behaviour.
absolutely.
And they might have, certainly been giving off mixed messages to the other individual, and they've acted on it,
Yeah,
perhaps misunderstanding the
yeah,
signals.
yeah.
So it might have been genuine and not intended to cause offence or
Mhm.
harm, but that other person would still be able to say it's unwanted conduct, and
Yeah.
I feel like I've been sexually harassed as a result.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And so we've got those examples, and that's quite challenging. But then we've got the flip side, and we've got the individual who's going around smacking girls on the bum and that type of behaviour as well, which also
yeah,
constitutes as sexual harassment. But as I say, these are all things that need to be ironed out ahead of a Christmas party. We need to be thinking around, well, do people truly understand what is professionalism, how they should be acting, what is respect, what is consent, and making sure that you have that culture built in ahead, and then you shouldn't really have these issues arise at a party event.
yeah. So for the benefit of the listeners and viewers, I think essentially as part and parcel of your event planning,
Mhm.
you will incorporate a sort of sexual harassment risk assessment of some
Mhm.
sort, and you will
Mhm.
work out all the potential areas of risk and what steps you can do to reduce those risks so that you can document the steps you took. If
Yeah.
anything happens, and then you're potentially on the hook for vicarious liability because someone has been sexually assaulted
Mhm.
or harassed, and they bring some kind of claim to the employment tribunals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
As I say, that falls under those prevention obligations. It would be recommended, and slightly away from our topic today, specifically around Christmas parties, but it would be recommended that that activity of risk assessment is conducted more broadly in any
yeah,
case. I would be looking to conduct a thorough risk assessment across the business and identify where there are potential concerns arising, any hotspots, should we say, or pinch points that could cause concern for from a risk perspective, and that's things like, is somebody lone working, traveling, meeting clients, have we got imbalance of power, age gaps, all of those things across the business, and that will help identify those risks more broadly speaking anyway.
yeah. And I think it's fair just to add to that that with the Employment Rights Bill going through, the onus on employers is actually going to increase when the
Yeah.
new legislation kicks in around October next year,
Mhm.
because it won't be just take reasonable steps, it'll be to take all reasonable steps,
Yeah.
which is basically if you miss one step that you should have taken and you
Mhm.
didn't take, then you're going to fall foul, even though you took 9 other steps, for
Yeah.
example. And then on top of that, we've got the extension of the harassment, so the prevention of harassment extending to third parties as well, which means then we need to make sure that our event supplier has taken its steps to train and
Mhm.
educate staff
Mhm.
not to harass any of our employees that are attending the
Yes.
venue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think, I've always, the conversations I have with clients when we're talking about like the risk assessments, whilst specifically the obligation around sexual harassment, I would say it's best practice to consider harassment in more general speaking.
yeah,
So we're talking about age, we're talking about sex, we're talking about race and religion there, with all those protected characteristics. What measures have we got in place to try and prevent any form of harassment taking place in the business? And that is really useful when we're considering around the event space, the
yeah,
venue, in terms of what access provisions have we got to make sure that we can accommodate individuals who might be wheelchair bound, as an example, or they might not be particularly suitable for an under 18, in that particular space. Then we're thinking about entertainment as well. Is it suitable? Could it be something where that person's known to tell inappropriate jokes, where you might have a group of individuals with certain protected characteristics that might become offended? Again, because we've organised this, should we have known that that could have happened, and therefore have we put that person in a position to feel unsafe because of that? And these are all things that we need to think about. In terms of obviously cost of events as well, what is your budget? How can we ensure that we've got safe travel for individuals? So again, if it's a whole company event, could you put on coaches? That's something that we
yeah,
do at Natfans. We try and make sure that everybody gets home safe at the end of that. We also need to think about, this term Christmas. We are living in a multicultural society. And actually, is that something that we want to communicate? Do we want to call it Christmas party, or do we want to call it the end
mm,
of year party celebrations? If we have a lot of individuals who might not celebrate Christmas, as an example, and also people who might not drink even as part of a religious reason.
yeah,
Again, something that we do need to consider in terms of those traditional Christmas party environments might not be something that they feel safe to attend. So are there alternatives that we can think of that might be more inclusive for everybody? So have a look and think about the demographic of your employees, what I'm saying with that. Certainly not suggesting that we can't have Christmas parties anymore, we can't call them Christmas parties, we can't have a drink. That's not the case at all. But have a think about who you have in your workforce and how can you make sure that is as inclusive as possible. But we've had even vegetarians, vegans, and people that have special dietary requirements when we're organising meals out. And that can
mm,
contribute and lead to grievances. It's not an easy feat to try and organise an event and accommodate everybody's needs and wants. But, having a think about these things and how we can try and help limit the risk. A final one as well. Again, when we're talking about setting expectations, think about your social media and set policy. What are the expectations around that as well? So, making sure that people are not engaging in, first of all, activity that shouldn't be doing. But then if posts are going online as well, do we need to think about that? And do we need to take any measures around that also?
it's quite interesting that last year I had a client who was involved with a wider investigation, but there's a video on social media on LinkedIn and TikTok, which is about a minute long, and I think it'd been done by the venue actually, and they've been taking videos of different things that were going on during the night, and it's supposed to be showing everyone having fun.
Mm.
But when you watch it, it's basically showing lots of people necking shots, drink after drink after drink after drink. And I was talking to the clients around sort of what kind of impression does that give to the outside world?
Mm.
And in particular, what if their customers see that? Or what if they have prospective employees that see that video and think, actually, that's not the kind of environment I want to go and work in? I don't feel that's very inclusive, etc. So we had
Mm.
this discussion around, is the Christmas party getting to the point where it's no longer inclusive and needs to be reviewed and revamped and made more inclusive.
Yeah.
And I think key to that is, as you mentioned, is understanding your workforce,
Hmm.
understanding the demographics of that workforce, maybe even sort of getting feedback, after the event about what worked, what didn't work. Is there anything else people would like to see? Or is there anything that we could do to accommodate their needs? And also doing that before the event, before we actually commit to what event we're doing, is actually say, what would you like from your Christmas party? Is there anything that would deter you from coming to a Christmas party, etc.? So it's worthwhile just interrogating the workforce in a friendly way, all around inclusivity and engagement,
Mm.
to understand what people actually want.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Good. So I think, sort of in summary, I think the key takeaways that we should be doing is setting the boundaries. I think that's absolutely critical, particularly if there are issues that arise from an event. At least we can demonstrate as an employee we've set those boundaries. We've been very clear as to what our expectations are, and if the incident is something that could be of a serious nature that potentially warrants dismissal, then an employment tribunal would expect us to have set out those boundaries. Trying to make sure we do some proper event planning, not just rock up without giving any thoughts to what the venue looks like, whether it's suitable,
Mm.
whether or not we've given clear instructions as to what our expectations are to the venue, and whether we've done the risk assessment and how we protect, sort of people generally from inappropriate behaviour, but also young people. Um, and sort of having to think about sort of inclusivity and how we can make sure everyone feels included. And because I do want to be the Christmas Grinch at all, still thinking about how can we make this event fun without it necessarily involving sort of too much alcohol or other things and people taking it too far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're finding now, there's some great companies out there that help and support workplace events where they start bringing along like oversized retro games and things like that. And going back to your childhood and having a bit of nostalgia, actually encouraging that type of activity where you've got things that people are doing actually at the
Yeah,
Christmas party might be a way of distracting from the drinking. It might be thinking, well, actually, no, I'm having a good on playing Connect Four with somebody, or I've got I want to try and capture. There's loads of one of those cash grab type machines and things like that.
yeah,
Those type of things might actually go some way in terms of detracting from the drinking culture that might have
yeah,
ordinarily occur in there. So there's lots and lots of things that businesses can consider. As I say, I think that the key really is making sure that we have that effective communication ahead of the party, regardless of what that party is, whether it's a really casual, we're just going for some drinks, or we're going to the Christmas markets after
yeah,
work. How will we risk assessing that? How are we making sure everybody's getting home safe? Who's going? What are we going to be doing whilst we're there? Just need to make sure we have that consideration rather than it being just off the cuff and then actually it grows arms and legs when we're there. People start falling out maybe, or something's happened and we've not really accounted for it. Of course, so we just need to take some steps in the event that something does happen, and that's really important that businesses don't try and brush it under the carpet. That's the worst thing that you can do. If it's reported, you need to act on it and in a timely manner. Making sure that you're following all your internal processes in line with your handbook, which should be in line with the ACAS code of practice. Um, Seeing if we are needing to instigate any in external investigation as well. So it could be maybe supporting an individual if there's a criminal element to the investigation. So we need to link in with the police potentially around that. Um, checking in whether there's things like CCTV. You're looking at speaking with the external provider if it's an event space. These are all things that we need to consider as part of any potential investigation while we're looking at. But we also want to make sure as well that people have the space and the ability to report a
Yeah, it's
concern.
really important.
So that is probably, from the biggest takeaway when we talk about sexual harassment in particular, and one of those obligations. Do you have a confidential reporting line? Is there somewhere that an individual can go to and report an issue without feeling like they have to identify themselves? Because that can be a real stopper for somebody who feels that they have been subjected to that type of behaviour. So there's lots of companies out there who can support in relation to that. But as a minimum, just trying to make sure we might have some champions in place where we've got people that people can go to, a bit almost like the mental health first aider type of individual. But ideally, we certainly want to be thinking about those reporting lines effectively.
That's great, Emma. Thank you for your words of wisdom. I hope that's been useful to our viewers and listeners. If you would like to find out more details about the support After Athena gives our clients across a range of employment law, HR, health and safety, and immigration, please let us know. If, of course, you have any issues at the Christmas party, fingers crossed you don't, then by all means, reach out to us and we're more than happy to help and assist. So thank you for listening and watching, and enjoy whatever celebrations you're enjoying at this time of year. Thank you.